The sun was slowly sinking behind the wide Texas plains, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. A soft wind moved through the tall grass, and the sound of horses in the distance mixed with the quiet rhythm of nature. It was summer, the kind of evening when the world seemed still for a moment, as if it were listening. Samuel Carter stood by the wooden fence of his ranch, his hands resting on the rough wood. He was a man in his early 50s with kind eyes that carried years of work, loss, and hope. His hat sat low over his forehead, and a few lines marked the corners of his face. Lines carved by the sun, the wind, and the passage of time. His ranch was not huge, but it was his pride. Every fence post, every horse, every patch of land had a story behind it. Samuel had grown up in hard times. He had learned from his father that respect was not something given, it was something earned. His ranch had survived droughts, storms, and seasons when the earth refused to give anything back. But Samuel never gave up. He believed in work, in kindness, and in giving people a chance when they needed it most. That evening, as he watched the sun slowly fade, he noticed a cloud of dust rising in the distance. It wasn't from his own horses. It was coming from the old dirt road that led to his front gate. Samuel straightened his back and narrowed his eyes. In the faint light, he could see a wagon slowly approaching. The sound of wooden wheels creaking broke the silence of the land. A few minutes later, the wagon came to a stop near the front yard of his ranch house. Samuel walked forward slowly, wiping his hands on his worn-out trousers. A man stepped down from the wagon. His clothes were old and dusty, his boots were torn, and his face looked tired, the kind of tiredness that doesn't come from just one long day but from many years of struggle. Behind the man sat a woman and two young girls. The woman held the girls close to her, as if she were trying to protect them from something she could not control. The girls were quiet, their wide eyes taking in everything around them. They looked to be around 12 and 14 years old, wearing simple dresses that had clearly been mended many times. Samuel gave a polite nod to the man. "Evening," he said in his calm, steady voice. The man nodded back. "Evening, sir," he replied, his voice shaking just a little. Samuel could tell this man hadn't come just to visit. He had seen this kind of look before, a mixture of shame, fear, and hope all tangled together. The man cleared his throat, looked down at the ground, and then slowly raised his eyes to meet Samuel's. "I heard you might be needing help on the ranch," he said softly. Samuel nodded. "I always need a good hand," he answered. "But that's not the only reason you're here, is it?" The man hesitated. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands were shaking slightly, and he took a deep breath as if gathering the courage to say something difficult. Finally, he spoke. We've got nothing left. The land dried up. The crops failed. We sold the animals. Then we sold the wagon. This is all that's left." His voice grew quieter with each word, as if he wished the wind could carry his troubles away. Samuel felt a heaviness settle in his chest. Times were cruel for many families. One bad season could take everything from you. He had seen neighbors lose their farms, their homes, their hope. The man's eyes turned to the two girls sitting silently on the wagon seat. He swallowed hard, and for a second he seemed to fight with himself. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, he said something that made the air feel colder. "We can't feed them anymore," he said, his eyes glistening with pain. "Please, take my daughters as payment. For the work, for anything, just let them live." The woman beside the girls covered her mouth, and tears rolled down her cheeks. The two girls froze, their small hands clutching each other tightly. Their eyes darted between their father and the man standing by the fence, the man they had never met before tonight. Samuel did not speak for a long time. The quiet of the ranch stretched out like a deep river. He looked at the father, not with anger, not with judgment, but with the heavy understanding of a man who knew how hard life could become. The father wasn't a bad man. He was a desperate man. Samuel could see it in the way his shoulders bent forward, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. Samuel slowly stepped closer. The girl's eyes followed him nervously. He removed his hat and held it at his side, letting the evening breeze touch his forehead. "What are their names?" Samuel asked gently. The man blinked, surprised at the question. "Mary and Anna," he said. "Mary's the older one." Samuel looked at the girls again. Mary sat a little taller, as if trying to be brave for her younger sister. Anna pressed close to her, gripping the edge of Mary's sleeve like it was the only thing keeping her safe. Samuel took a deep breath. "They're not something you give away," he said quietly. The father's head dropped. "I know," he whispered, "but I've run out of choices. The world's not kind to people like us anymore." For a moment, Samuel thought of his own past. He thought of the time when his father had nearly lost their land, when neighbors had disappeared one by one, leaving behind empty houses and broken fences. He remembered what it felt like to be powerless against something bigger than yourself. He turned his eyes toward the horizon, where the sun was now almost gone, leaving behind soft shades of blue and gray. Then he looked back at the father. "I won't take them as payment," Samuel said firmly. The man's head jerked up, a flash of panic crossing his face. "Then we've got nowhere to go," he said quickly. "They'll starve. We'll all starve." Samuel raised a hand gently, stopping his words. "I didn't say I wouldn't help you," he continued. "I said I won't take your daughters as if there's something to be traded." The father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The woman held her breath. Even the wind seemed to pause. Samuel stepped closer to the wagon, not to intimidate, but to stand nearer to the family in need. He looked at Mary and Anna, really looked at them, not as burdens, not as bargains, but as children who deserved more than this moment. "Listen," Samuel said, his voice steady and kind. "You can work here. I've got more chores than I can handle. I can pay you a fair wage, and your family can stay in the small house near the barn until you get back on your feet. But your daughters stay with you, as your family, not mine. Not anyone's to take." The father stared at him as if he hadn't heard right. "You'd do that?" he asked in disbelief. Samuel nodded once. "I would." The woman let out a soft cry of relief, covering her face with her hands. The two girls looked at each other, their shoulders slowly relaxing as if a tight knot in their hearts had begun to loosen. The father lowered his head and whispered, "Thank you." Samuel didn't say anything more. He turned toward the barn and said, "Come on then. Let's get you settled. You've had a long road." As the wagon rolled forward again, Samuel walked beside it. The sun was gone now, and the stars were beginning to appear one by one. The night air was cooler, but it felt lighter too, like something good had just taken root on this land. Mary glanced at Samuel as they passed through the front gate. She didn't know this man, but something in his calm steps made her feel a little less afraid. She squeezed Anna's hand gently. Anna looked back and whispered, "Are we going to be okay?" Mary didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while she said, "I think so." Samuel led them to the small house near the barn. It was simple but clean, a place where they could sleep without worry. The family stepped inside, their tired faces softening in the warm light of the small lamp. Samuel stood at the door for a moment, watching them. He knew tomorrow would be a long day filled with work, but tonight, something more important had happened. A family had been given not just a roof or food, but their dignity. He put his hat back on and walked toward the stable, where the horses shifted softly in their stalls. The stars above seemed brighter now, scattered like little pieces of hope across the dark sky. Samuel didn't see himself as a hero. He was just a man who believed that people weren't things to be owned or traded. And as the night wrapped itself around the ranch, that belief felt stronger than ever. The next morning came softly, with the sky painted in pale orange and pink. The roosters crowed in the distance, and the ranch slowly woke to a new day. Samuel was already up before the sun. It was his habit to rise early, to greet the quiet morning, and to make sure the ranch started its day right. When he walked toward the small house near the barn, he saw a small light inside. The family was awake. The man stepped outside with a nervous smile on his face. His clothes were still worn, but there was a small spark in his eyes that had not been there the night before. Mary and Anna peeked out from the door, their hair a little messy from sleep, but their faces calmer than yesterday. Samuel smiled and gave a polite nod. "Morning," he said. The man nodded back. "Morning, Mr. Carter," he said softly. "Samuel," the rancher corrected with a kind smile. "Call me Samuel." It was a simple moment, but it broke the invisible wall between them. Samuel didn't want them to feel like strangers or beggars. He wanted them to feel human, to stand beside him, not below him. They followed him to the main barn. It was a big structure with strong wooden beams. the kind of place that smelled of hay, horses, and years of hard work. Samuel handed the man a pair of gloves and showed him the morning tasks: feeding the horses, cleaning the stalls, and preparing the fields for the day. The work was honest and tiring, but it gave the man something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. Mary and Anna stood at the barn door at first, unsure if they should help or stay out of the way. Samuel noticed their curious eyes and waved them over with a gentle smile. "You don't have to help," he said kindly. "But if you want to learn, I can teach you a thing or two." Mary hesitated, but Anna tugged at her sleeve. Slowly they walked inside. The smell of hay was warm and fresh. A calm horse leaned its head over the stall and sniffed Anna's hand. She giggled softly, surprised that something so big could be so gentle. Samuel crouched down next to her and showed her how to hold her hand flat so the horse could sniff it without fear. Mary watched carefully, her worries slowly melting into a quiet sense of wonder. The day went by with steady work. The man, whose name Samuel learned was Thomas, worked harder than anyone Samuel had ever seen. He was quiet but determined, moving with the energy of someone who wanted to prove himself. The girls spent their time learning small things: how to feed a horse, how to brush its coat, how to carry buckets of water without spilling. For the first time in a long while, laughter slipped out of Anna's mouth like sunshine through a cloud. Samuel didn't say anything, but inside he felt a small warmth spread in his chest. He liked seeing joy return to places where sadness once lived. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to feel like a home not just for Samuel, but for Thomas and his family too. Thomas earned his wage with honest work. Samuel didn't treat him like a servant or a guest. He treated him like a partner, someone who mattered. Every evening after work, they would sit outside the barn on old wooden chairs, sharing simple talk. Samuel learned that Thomas once had a small farm, not too far from town. It had been good land, but bad seasons had taken it away bit by bit. Mary used to help her mother with the garden, and Anna had loved climbing trees and feeding chickens. Life had been kind to them once. Then it had turned harsh. But on the ranch, little by little, they were finding their strength again. Mary was growing stronger too. She was no longer just a quiet girl watching from the side. She learned how to ride a horse, how to carry hay, and how to move with confidence. Samuel noticed how her eyes started to shine when she talked about the future. Anna, too, ran freely across the fields with the ranch dog chasing after her. Samuel didn't push them. He simply gave them space to grow, and they bloomed in their own time. One afternoon, as the warm breeze swept across the land, Thomas approached Samuel while fixing the fence. "You didn't have to do all this," Thomas said quietly. His voice still carried the weight of the past, but there was also gratitude in it. Samuel tightened a piece of wire before answering. "Maybe I didn't," he said calmly. "But I wanted to. People aren't things to be traded. Everyone deserves a fair chance." Thomas lowered his head. "I'll never forget that." Samuel looked at him not as a man giving charity, but as one man to another. "I don't want you to forget," he said. "I want you to stand strong again. For your daughters, for yourself." The words touched Thomas deeply. For the first time in years, he began to believe he could build something again, not from fear but from hope. Months passed. The ranch grew more alive than ever. With Thomas's hard work, the land was in better shape than it had been in years. New fences were built, the crops near the small stream began to grow well, and the horses were strong and healthy. Mary became an excellent rider. She had a calmness with animals that impressed everyone who visited. Anna learned fast too. She was bold and curious, never afraid to ask questions or try new things. One warm evening, the town held a small gathering at the nearby church field. Families from all around came to share food, music, and stories. Samuel insisted that Thomas and his family join him. They hesitated at first, they still felt like outsiders, but Samuel smiled and said, "You're part of this land now. Come on." When they arrived, people were curious. Everyone knew Thomas's story. They knew how close the family had come to losing everything. But when they saw Thomas standing tall, Mary laughing with other children, and Anna skipping in the grass, they saw something else too, a family that had found its strength again. Mary joined the horse-riding demonstration with a borrowed mare. She rode with steady hands and bright eyes, and when she finished, the crowd clapped for her. She blushed, not used to such attention, but she smiled anyway. A real smile, the kind that comes from the heart. That night, as they rode home in the wagon, Anna leaned against Mary's shoulder. "I don't feel scared anymore," she whispered. Mary stroked her hair softly. "Me neither," she replied. Thomas, sitting at the front with Samuel, turned his head slightly. He didn't say anything, but the look on his face said everything. It was a look of quiet pride and thankfulness. As the years went by, Mary and Anna grew up on that land. Mary became one of the best horse trainers in the area. People came from nearby towns to learn from her gentle way with animals. Anna, full of life and laughter, helped her father run a small business raising horses and crops. Thomas built a modest but warm home for his family near the ranch. Samuel, who had once been alone, now found his ranch filled with the sound of laughter, shared meals, and hope. He never saw them as people who owed him anything. They were part of something bigger, a small, living reminder that kindness could change lives. One summer afternoon, as Samuel sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, he watched Mary lead a young horse around the paddock. Her movements were confident, graceful. Anna was helping her father carry hay to the barn, laughing at something silly. Samuel smiled softly. He thought back to that evening years ago when a broken wagon had arrived at his gate, when fear had filled their eyes and hopelessness had been heavy in the air. He remembered the father's shaking voice, the girl's frightened hands, and the quiet moment when everything changed. He hadn't done it to be a hero. He had done it because deep down, he believed in people, in their worth, in their dignity, in their right to live a life not defined by pain or despair. And now, looking at them, he knew he had been right. The sun dipped low again, painting the sky with golden red just like that first evening. But everything was different now. The ranch was full of life. The sound of laughter, the rhythm of hooves, the smell of fresh hay. It all felt like music to Samuel's heart. He leaned back on the chair, his old hat tilted forward just slightly. The cool breeze touched his face, carrying with it the sound of Mary's laughter. This wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was a place where broken stories were mended, where a family had been given the space to grow, and where kindness had turned fear into a future. And Samuel Carter, a simple rancher, sat there quietly, knowing that the best payments in life were not coins or property. They were moments like this, and full of hope, full of life, and full of humanity.